my lads and my ladies, my girls and my boys, my dogs, cats, rabbits, goldfish, turtles, parrots, and any other sort of pets who are hanging around and listening intently to me today. Now, this is the second part of the episode that I'm calling Just Guests Like You, the first part of which you heard a fortnight ago. Well, I'm actually on time despite all my other engagements, and we are going to wrap up the last of my otherworldly experiences today. The other two you've already heard. The first one in the episode I did with the Sundance Kid. The second one in the last part one of this particular episode. And today is the third one. Technically the second, because this came between the first and the one I've talked about in the first part of this episode. So this was a really, really creepy experience. I was scared out of my wits. It's very authentic, obviously, because I'm telling it to you, and I swear to you that every word of this is true. Everything that I experienced on that evening is true. And the story I heard that explained that phenomenon was not just chilling, it was also very painful. So while you are listening to this particular story today, I want you not just to feel scared, which you should, but also to think a little bit about the kind of treatment we mete out sometimes to those who are closest to us, who have contributed the most to our welfare, to our life, because of whom we are what we are today, because of whom our futures will move in a certain direction, to whom we owe so much, at least a minimum amount of affection, caring, warmth, which very often we simply refuse to do. I don't know why, but I'm aware that, whatever I'm going to be telling you today in today's story, the backstory of my experience is awfully tragic, awfully sad, but it's not a unique story. This happens all the time, all around the world. Unfortunately, many of these other stories just become a headline in a newspaper. Very few acquire the kind of otherworldly dimensions that this particular story did, perhaps because of the sheer brutality of what went into it. So I hope you'll also, think about making, or at least helping the world go around a little better, and at least at your personal level, to make sure that you treat your family, your friends, and other people you care about with the kind of respect, the kind of affection, the kind of love and caring that they deserve. That is my biggest takeaway from this story, this perfectly 100% true story that I experienced myself. And just to set the tone, I would like to, I know I haven't been singing for a while, various reasons, but today I couldn't stop myself. So I'm going to sing to you these very evocative lines in a way from an old Hindi film, and because this reflects so well what this particular ghost story, shall we say, is all about. कहते हैं लोग सारे एक दिन लौट के परदेसी घर आएंगे, तब तक कौन जिएगा, हम तो गम से मर जाएंगे, ये तुझे क्या पता, दिल है वो आईना, तोड़ के फिर जैसे मुश्किल है जोड़ना, तेरे बिन नहीं जीना, मर जाना जालिमा, तेरे बिन नहीं जीना, मर जाना जालिमा, तेरे बिन नहीं जीना, मर जाना जालिमा, तेरे बिन नहीं जीना, मर जाना जालिमा. Let's move on to my second weird experience, shall we? This one happened, as I said, around 12 years ago while I was posted in London. I had already been in my dream city thanks to Georgette Hare's delicious period romances that I devoured in my misspent youth. So I'd been there for about a couple of years by then. I was loving my work and thoroughly enjoying living in Mayfair, the poshest address in London, right next to the Hyde Park, where all Hare's characters would land up sooner or later, perambulating, preening, and being pursued and persuaded with a quietly flowing serpentine, witnessing their shenanigans. The Sundance Kid was with me as always, gloriously happy with a new school and sassy enough by then to want to invite the Queen, who was a neighbor, incidentally, with Buckingham Palace barely a mile away, home for tea. Once my older daughter joined us there to pursue her postgrad degree, our life turned perfect. We watched amazing theatrical shows, attended fabulous music and dance concerts, and visited the Tower of London to fume over the stolen Kohinoor. We collaborated officially with world-class museums, were invited to stunning art galleries and Shakespeare festivals in Stratford-on-Avon, and traveled to exquisitely beautiful destinations in Scotland and Ireland and Wales. In short, we were having a ball. Since my work gave me a very public profile, within the first year itself, I developed a large circle of friends, acquaintances, and contacts, and spent most evenings entertaining or being entertained. An integral part of any diplomat's job. Trust me though, the alcohol and protocol form barely 20% of the vast spectrum of responsibilities that we handle. The entertainment part is merely the grease that eases our way through the complex dynamics of bilateral and multilateral relations. Very often, boring receptions and black-tie dinners are the occasions when you interact with and even start a friendship with the who's who of your host government, so that when there's something urgent, you can simply, as one of my ambassadors stated picturesquely, pick up the phone and say, "Hi, Bob, I've got a problem." London, of course, has a huge and very prosperous Indian community, and forging ties with them is an important part of an Indian diplomat's work. Fresh immigrants in particular, whether permanent or temporary, are still nostalgic about India, and unlike second and third generation British Indians, who are very different from us, believe me, they're pretty clued up about and involved with what's happening back home. They love keeping in touch with the High Commission, attending events organized by the mission, and being on good terms with Indian diplomats posted there. Attending dinners and get-togethers hosted by them and reciprocating their hospitality is, hence, a frequent occurrence. That particular evening, I was attending a dinner at the lovely home of a delightful Indian couple who had moved to London a few years ago and had purchased their own place around 14-15 months ago. The dinner was a small affair with just a half dozen guests, and since we all knew each other well, the evening was turning out to be relaxed and fun. Around 11 p.m., people began to stir and to say their goodnights and take the leave of our gracious hosts. Their home was in the suburbs, and since I had a long drive ahead back to Mayfair, I asked to use their washroom before calling for my car. And they showed me to a prettily appointed one right next to the sitting room. Theirs was a duplex house with both bedrooms on the first floor, but as they explained apologetically, there was just one bathroom for residents and guests alike. The Brits, you see, still do not believe in wasting space on unnecessary luxuries such as a second bathroom, where one would do, or even on what they call en suites. We call them attached bathrooms and simply take them for granted. In London, though, if you have one of those, it's something you boast about to your friends. As I stepped inside and shut the door behind me, I absently wondered why they'd found it necessary to clarify that they had just that one bathroom. I mean, I hadn't been planning to go upstairs to look for another one anyway, right? Before I could speculate any further, though, something very strange began to happen to me. For no reason at all, I felt myself go cold all over. Ice crackling along my spine and cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. My skin prickled with inexplicable goosebumps, and the hair on the nape of my neck rose, even as my heart raced and my pulse pounded, and my stomach clenched defensively. For a moment, I wondered if my blood sugar had suddenly plunged, something that had happened a couple of times before, leaving me with a sort of sinking feeling and a strong urge to guzzle a glass of sugary Coke. But no, this didn't feel the same at all. My next thought was that perhaps an ill-fitting window was letting in a chill draft, till I recalled that we were in the middle of a particularly warm July and the outside temperature was in the late 20s. So no, it couldn't possibly be a freezing gust of air either. I realized to my own shock, simply frightened out of my wits. And I had no idea why. The perfumed space with its apple green tiles and aquamarine walls gleamed inoffensively around me, adorned with a vase of fresh flowers, colorful hand towels, and framed prints of seascapes that added a serene note to the ambience. There was nothing even remotely scary that I could see or hear. Yet, when I stood in front of the wash basin, soaping my trembling hands, I felt ants crawling up and down my back, convinced that someone was standing right behind me, barely inches away. I was too terrified to even look at the mirror, absolutely certain that if I did, I'd find a pair of eyes staring back at me. Brr. The vivid memory of those few minutes in that bathroom still gives me the heebie-jeebies. Having rushed through my ablutions, I sprinted to the door, pulled it open, and literally flung myself through it. Goosebumps still prickling my arms and small shivers still riding my spine. Our hosts, I'm going to call them Pratik and Navya, were standing just a few feet away, bidding farewell to the last of their departing guests. All three turned to stare at me as I shot out into the living room like a bullet from a gun. I skidded to a halt, suddenly feeling rather foolish, as I wondered if I'd just allowed my imagination to run away with me. And yet, in that moment, nothing on earth would have persuaded me to step back into that bathroom. Even though, as soon as I shut the door behind me, the inexplicable fear had just drained out of me, leaving me feeling rather disoriented. "Hey, are you all right?" Navya asked, her expression concerned but also a little peculiar. I thought. You look so pale. What happened? I'm fine. I tried to smile, understandably reluctant to confess what I'd experienced inside. It's a bit cold in there, isn't it? It took me by surprise, that's all. The couple exchanged a quick, anxious glance while the remaining guest looked on interestedly, obviously too curious to walk away. So, you felt it too, did you? Pratik murmured, looking inexplicably contrite. Had there been any other bathroom in the house, we wouldn't have asked you to use this one. Navya and I are sort of used to it by now and have learned to complete our business in there at record speed. But guests sometimes tend to have a hard time. Not everyone, of course. I'd say the ratio is 50-50. Totally mystified, I asked them what they meant. And after a moment's hesitation, Pratik confessed reluctantly, we never talk about this unless we are asked, because, some people end up regarding us as lunatics, while others are offended by what they believe is a sick joke. Since you seem to have experienced the phenomenon in technicolor, so to say, you do deserve to know. Tell me, did you feel irrationally terrified in there? Blood freezing, cold sweat, heart sinking. Did you feel you weren't alone? That someone was standing right behind you, even though you couldn't see a thing? My goosebumps had subsided by then. But now they pocked my arms again as I heard Pratik accurately describe my experience, as though he knew it firsthand. That was somehow spookier than believing that I was the only one to have had an accidental brush with something bizarre. How do you know that? I asked, choosing to neither confirm nor deny, mindful of the other guest, who may well decide that I was mentally challenged and write a confidential note to that effect to my High Commissioner. Because Pratik and I, Navya offered quietly, go through exactly that almost every day. We used to get totally freaked initially, but wouldn't mention it to each other, convinced that the other person would simply laugh themselves silly. It was only when Pratik asked me one day if I ever sensed any strange vibes in the house that I felt brave enough to tell him why my bathroom usage time had gone down so drastically. I was shocked when he confessed that he'd been having exactly the same experience, but hadn't said anything to me because he didn't want to scare me. At that point, we even seriously contemplated selling the house and moving somewhere else, but well, this place has turned out to be surprisingly affordable, and now we know why. Plus, it's in a good neighborhood and so well connected to everywhere. Pratik's office is just 3 kilometers away and mine is even closer. We realized that we wouldn't be able to buy anything half as nice unless we went way beyond our budget. Since the rest of the house is absolutely normal, we decided to grit our teeth and just ride it out for a couple of years till we had more money to spend on another house. After all, we don't live in the bathroom, do we? Just a few minutes of that every day, and then we can enjoy the lovely rooms and the spacious garden outside. I was desperate to ask more questions about what all three of us seemed to have experienced, but wasn't sure if we should take this conversation any further in the presence of the other guest. My unease must have shown on my face because Pratik gave me a lopsided grin and declared, "Oh, don't mind Avinash, he's one of us." I gave the 40-ish gentleman a startled glance and he nodded matter-of-factly at me. "Indeed," he acknowledged. "Twice, maybe thrice. Pretty disconcerting, but I like these guys enough to brave it for the sake of our friendship. Only when I absolutely have to, of course." I turned to stare at our hosts with part bewilderment and part admiration. Wow, some sang-froid you guys have. Was it always like this, or is it something new? From day one, Navya admitted. When Pratik and I finally began talking about it, we wondered what it could possibly be. Since the G word doesn't form part of our daily lexicon, we concluded that it must be negative vibes of some kind. So we tried lighting camphor, placing a bowl of salt, and even hanging crystals in there in consultation with my sister, who is a Reiki master. The ambience felt a little better for a day or so and we began to breathe easy. Then the shivers returned. And no matter how much camphor we burnt and how much salt we placed in the bathroom after that, it never made a jot of difference. Pratik nodded. That's right. And we just didn't know what else to do. Luckily for us, an old college friend of ours from India came to visit around that time and stayed with us for a few days. We loved having her over, but what about the bathroom? Should we warn her? We debated. Or just cross our fingers and hope that she would be immune to the vibes? As I said, around half our guests don't experience anything. What we didn't take into account, though, was this friend's profession. Huh? I gaped at them. What has someone's profession got to do with that? I waved an explanatory hand towards the bathroom. Everything, as it turned out, Navya declared. Anandi, you see, is a professional and very well-known astrologer and tarot reader. She also happens to be a tantric, but she added quickly and somewhat defensively, not at all like the ones you usually hear about. Her guru made her swear that she would never use her powers to hurt or harm. I nodded reassuringly at her. For those of you who don't know who or what a tantric is, it's a term used in India for the practitioners of a specific spiritual tradition called Tantra Vidya. This stream of profound learning is often ignorantly equated with black magic just because it deals with otherworldly concepts and, shall we say, beings. The truth is that, like every other kind of knowledge, including physics, chemistry, and biology, it can be used on both sides of the ethical divide. Oh, so there was no way she could be immune to whatever's in there, I commented thoughtfully. An old woman offered Avinash cryptically and shrugged when I glanced at him askance. That's who she encountered. I must have looked as confused as I felt because Pratik hastened to explain. The ghost of an old woman, he means. Rational and educated people that we are, Navya and I had avoided even speculating in that direction. It just sounded so illogical and superstitious, you know. We never believed in hauntings, but apparently that's what we had been experiencing. The first time Anandi went into the bathroom, a few minutes after she landed at our house, she stayed inside for almost half an hour, much to our concern. She had either a really upset tummy or she had fainted or something because she was extra sensitive to the persistent negativity. We were just about to go knock on the door when she came out, looking rather pensive and surprisingly a little teary-eyed. She looked at us and asked simply, "Did you know that you have the spirit of a grieving old woman haunting that bathroom?" Stunned by the disclosure, we admitted that we'd been feeling something in our 4 months in this house by that time, but had never imagined it could be anything of that kind. Anandi told us that she felt the cold terror as soon as she stepped inside. Navya took over. But being more attuned to otherworldly stuff because of her background, she also detected the undertones of grief and despair. She said she was as intrigued as she was apprehensive. So, when she stood at the basin washing her hands, she felt the presence at her back, just like you did tonight, and broke into goosebumps. However, rather than rushing off like a frightened lamb, as we all do, she decided to get to the bottom of it. Focusing her energy, she calmly invited whoever it was to show themselves. She was there to listen and help. When she looked in the mirror again, there was a woman standing at her shoulder and staring into her eyes. An old woman, she said, in her early 70s perhaps, painfully thin and haggard, wearing a simple cotton sari and looking indescribably sad and a little mad. "Oh dear God," I whispered, my hand trembling when I placed it on my thundering heart. I'd have fallen down dead with sheer fright. "Well, you're not a steel-nerved tantric, are you?" said Avinash kindly. "Don't be hard on yourself." "Exactly," said Pratik. Anandi didn't turn around, realizing that the manifestation in the mirror was probably not a reflection. She just asked the woman who she was and why she was haunting the bathroom. The story the shade shared with her, and which she told us in turn, shook us to the core. It was so tragic and so utterly inhuman. The poor lady had accompanied her only son when he moved to London along with his wife on a 2-year assignment. The wife had been particularly insistent, refusing to leave her aging mother-in-law in the care of her 2 daughters in India. They rented the same house just, I think, a couple of years before we bought it for the duration of their stay, and had settled in within a few weeks. It all started with the old lady helping a little with setting up the house and cooking an occasional meal for the family, till the daughter-in-law got herself a contractual job and began staying out more and more. Over the months, the mother found herself steadily relegated to the role of an unpaid house help, expected to cook, clean, and do the washing up every day. They literally put her under house arrest, stopped introducing her to their friends, and confiscated her mobile, so she couldn't have unsupervised conversations with her daughters or other relatives in India. They would actually lock her up in the house when they went out to prevent her from meeting the neighbors. When her health started failing due to the stress and the overwork, they impatiently gave her some over-the-counter medicines and told her to stop making a scene. Which was horrible enough. Navya shuddered in sympathy, but it was about to get worse. The couple suddenly decided to go out of the country for a week-long holiday. And of course, there was no question of taking the mother along. Initially, they just told her that she'd have to manage on her own for the duration, till they realized, apparently, that leaving the keys with her would mean that she'd be able to go out and ask for help. Similarly, leaving the phone with her would mean that she'd be able to contact her daughters and tell them what was going on. So, they changed their mind and told her that they would stock the fridge with provisions and lock her in for that week. The poor woman panicked and turned a little hysterical. Who wouldn't? Begging them not to do that. What would she do if she fell ill or the house caught fire or something? Unfortunately, her pleading spurred them into taking even more drastic steps. Probably because they didn't want her to start beating on the door or breaking the windows or screaming to attract her neighbor's attention. So, before they left for the airport, they piled some bread and packet snacks, bottles of water, and a few changes of clothes in the bathroom. And, oh hell, I still get totally wrecked when I think of what those monsters did. Navya choked up and Pratik patted her shoulder consolingly before concluding grimly. And then they led their poor, bewildered mother into the bathroom. Before she could understand what they were planning, they pulled the door shut and locked it from outside. Leaving her crying and begging, they pocketed the key and just left, secure in the knowledge that she wouldn't be able to get out. And no matter how loudly she screamed, the sound would not travel to any of the neighboring houses. That's where she spent 5 miserable days, sleeping on the cold tiles, since the inhuman pair had forgotten to leave her any bedding. She was running a high fever induced by shock and fear, unable to eat the crap they'd left for her, and growing progressively weaker. During the last 2 days, she didn't even have the strength to twist the cap of a bottle of water. That's how she died. Of untreated fever, starvation, and dehydration. Breathing her last on the floor of that bathroom. Her son and his wife returned 2 days later to find her stiff and cold body curled up against the bathtub. Once they got over the initial panic, they pulled the body out, carried it upstairs, and tucked it in bed. Then they cleared the bathroom of the telltale food and clothing, called the police, and reported that they had just returned from a short work trip to find that their mother had quietly passed away in her bed. Since the lady was in her 70s and the post-mortem revealed nothing unusual, they managed to obtain a certificate for death by natural causes. Unwilling to arouse any curiosity among neighbors, they quickly found a new home and moved away. She, however, couldn't leave. As she told Anandi, she had nowhere else to go. So she just stayed on, trapped in the bathroom by her pain and grief and helpless anger. That's what we all feel when we step into her intense little energy field. It was such a blood-curdling story. Navya sighed, and we felt so terribly sorry for the poor spirit. Even so, living in a house with a haunted bathroom wasn't the ideal situation, so we asked Anandi what we could do about it. She told us not to worry because she had already taken care of the problem. How? Well, as the ghost finished her really sad reminiscences, Anandi heard the drone of an aircraft flying overhead and had a brilliant idea. She told the dead woman that she did have a place to go, back home to India, and her daughters, who, unlike their heartless brother, truly cared for her. That plane overhead could be her ticket to freedom from the prison of this bathroom that held such terrible memories and moments. If she wasn't yet ready to cross the veil to the other side, she could at least bide her time in a familiar place around people who loved her deeply and mourned her sincerely. There's nothing and no one here for you anymore, Mother, Anandi had argued. The two who left you here to die alone are long gone. Why linger on? The ghost in the mirror stayed for another moment, looking wistful and uncertain. Then she nodded and just vanished, evidently deciding to take Anandi's advice. And the bathroom's ambience changed abruptly, all the fear and menace draining out of it. Anandi urged us to go in and check for ourselves, and it was as she claimed, totally cleansed of the shade's cold, heavy presence. And that's how it stayed for a month. My mind boggled at the idea of unfortunate passengers and crew in some random plane suddenly seized with terror when they stepped into an inexplicably freezing and frightening lavatory or galley. But Wait a minute. If the old lady had actually got that flight, who's in there now in that case? I demanded anxiously, wondering if this house had a long history of people dying in the bathroom, so that if one ghost left, another promptly took its place. You said the bathroom's aura had been cleansed, but for a month, Pratik clarified with a resigned sigh. A month that was pure bliss for Navya and me. Then suddenly, one fine morning, Navya went in and came hurtling out within a couple of minutes, trembling and pale, to report that the haunting had commenced again. She was right. I went in and found the same creeping terror chill my bones. We didn't know why, but our resident ghost had returned. Maybe because she discovered that the plane had carted her off somewhere other than her hometown and could only find her way back to this house. Or maybe this place simply reeled her back in because she's still tied to the memories of her awful, heart-rending death here. We don't know. And nor does Anandi, because she can't question the phantom on phone from India, can she? So we're back to square one and have simply come to terms with the haunting. That doesn't mean that we won't charge out of here like prisoners escaping the gallows the moment we find another house and can dispose of this one. Have you tried an exorcism? I asked, cringing inwardly at how superstitious I sounded. Or maybe a havan? A purifying fire ritual to cleanse the house? Both, Pratik said succinctly. Doesn't work. The presence recedes for a day or two and then just comes back. We've given up. She'll leave when she does, and probably much after we do. And that was that. I did visit Pratik and Navya another couple of times, but studiously avoided their bathroom. I left London a couple of years later and sort of lost touch with them, but I did hear from mutual friends that they finally sold the house and moved somewhere else. I have no idea if the grieving, angry phantom is still around, and if she is, what the new owners make of it. With no Anandi available to tell them that tragic story of cruel abandonment, they must be doing what my friends used to do, drastically curtailing their time in the bathroom. Or maybe they just got lucky and were immune to the presence, like half the guests Pratik and Navya entertained in that house. As for me, I still shudder at the ghastly, unnerving memory of that evening. Never again have I felt anything even remotely similar, thank God. Even the anklets in the night episode, evoked more speculative apprehension, shall we say, than terror. Now you know all about my 3 brushes with the strange and the weird. And I hope the 2 I've shared with you today gave you some shudder-worthy moments. This, incidentally, is the penultimate episode of the first season of Tattle Tales with Sangeeta Bahadur. I'll share one last story with you in a fortnight's time, hopefully, and then wind up for the next few months. There are 2 major reasons for that. One, I need to replenish my stock of tales and recordings before I talk to you again. And 2, my new book, Devadasi, an alternate history cum fantasy based in the India of 6th century BCE, has just been released, and I don't think I'll find any time between book launches, readings, discussions, and other promotional activities to look for stories, write them down, and record them for your pleasure. As I've said before, it takes a lot of time, effort, and creative energy to create an episode, and I don't want to do a half-hearted job. One last tale hence, and then Tattle Tales goes into hibernation. How long that lasts would depend on how badly you miss these stories. I'd urge you hence to catch up with the ones you've missed, leave likes and comments, and get your friends and family, colleagues and acquaintances to also watch, like and subscribe to the channel. The more interest I see, the sooner I'll come back with more stories. In the meanwhile, here's my Sundance kid, my little twinkling star, very earnestly promoting Devadasi. I hope you'll listen to her and pick up a copy each. Here she is.
Hello everyone, this is my mama's new book, Devadasi. Please buy, it's very beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you. Isn't she the sweetest little advertiser? Well, now that she's said what she wanted to, I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Before we say au revoir. I'll miss you, but well, can't be helped. And I do hope that you'll miss me even more, so that I get a reason to come back to you with more of these totally original and very interesting stories. In the meanwhile, take care of yourself, and I'll see you once more, as I said, in hopefully a fortnight's time. Bye.